بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. لله تبارك وتعالى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I praise Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. I ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to send countless blessings and salutations upon Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his family, his companions, and all those who follow them in excellence into the day of judgment. And I ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to endow upon us the sincere and pure and noble intentions. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala open for us the openings of the knowers of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and assemble us under the banner of Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on the day of judgment. Insha'Allah Ta'ala, before tomorrow we start our new book, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. I wanted to review the cases that we mentioned so that everyone, insha'Allah Ta'ala, is clear on our direction and what we're doing. And there are some points that I want to highlight, insha'Allah Ta'ala. So we will, insha'Allah, read over what we covered quickly and then give you an opportunity to clarify any issues or questions that you may have about this important topic. The conclusion of what we want to get at and what we're going to study and talk about is that it is necessary upon all of us to follow in our religion qualified scholarship, right? That's the important key. And not only that's one part of it, but also it is important to understand what is qualified scholarship, right? And when I say what is qualified scholarship that is accepted by the nation of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the scholars, they put people in ranks in terms of their knowledge. And when we're talking about al-fiqh, the rules of the religion, you have ranks of people. And there is something that Sheikh Shuaib Arnaout, rahimahullah, was mentioned in the biography of in his biography, that's mentioned there in the biography. Let's go to if you go to page 1098, right? That's the biography of Shuaib Arnaout. The biography number is X331. These are references for you to, look at. At the end of after he talked about his biography, the translator, he mentioned that in our times, as sheikhs qualified to teach the classical works of the Islamic sciences grow steadily fewer, right? So we're talking about the classical books of Islam, al-fiqh, and the various Islamic sciences. You don't have many people today that are qualified to explain those books in details, so it's getting hard to find people like that. He mentioned this point, and this is reality. He said, Shuaib's hope is that such expanded and annotated editions will to some extent fulfill the educational needs of Muslims who read them, because he took major books of hadith like Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and he put a lot of notes in them, which actually his edition of the Musnad of Imam Ahmad is 50 volumes. The average is like 6 volumes, maybe even some bigger, a little 10, but his edition is 50 volumes. And what makes his editions in all of his works, like Sharh Sunnah or the Sahih of Ibn Hibban, and other books that he did the work on, is his editing of those works and his cross-referencing and going to the original sources of the hadith in there and showing you where they're found. That makes the books very, very valuable, especially in hadith. He said, though he will probably be remembered for his work in hadith, he strongly believes that the Muslims should take their religion from those with the best understanding of the primary text of the Quran and the prophetic traditions, meaning the Sunnah or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, at their forefront, the Imams of the 4 schools. So even though he's a scholar of hadith, he's pointing to the fact that, no, I'm talking about Sheikh Shuaib Arnaout, something that he quoted. I wanted to highlight this. That we should take our religion from those who are the most qualified and have the best understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. And at the forefront of those are the 4 Imams, Sayyiduna Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Al-Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and those scholars who followed in their methodology in each of their respective madhabs. He said about them, and this is a quote, they are explainers, not popes, right? But in each of their schools thereafterwards followed 100 or more scholars who refined and added to their work. Okay, the reader is here. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Okay, you've come to save the day. We're on page 1098. So we're towards the end of the biography of Sheikh Shuaib, which is X331. So it's on page 298 at the bottom, where he talks about the Imams of the 4 schools. They are explainers, not popes. You follow me?
Inshallah.
Okay, that's where we were reading at.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, Sheikh Shuaib Arnaut. Is Shuaib ibn
No, just down on the other page at the bottom where we're at. The end of his biography.
Oh.
So where he's quoted about the 4 Imams, at the end, the last 6 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 lines.
They are explainers, not
yes, right there.
They're
So
explainers.
he's talking about the 4 Imams and basically saying, even though I am an expert in the field of hadith, you should take your religion from those who have the best understanding of the primary texts of the Quran and the Sunnah. And at the forefront of those are the 4 Imams, right? Abu Hanifa, Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in.
They are explainers, not popes, he says. But in each of their schools thereafterwards followed 100 or more scholars who refined and added to their work, men whose stature in Islamic knowledge was like mountains, any of whom could put 15 of the scholars available today in his pocket.
You should highlight this. I really, this expression to me, like, is so powerful in reality that you're talking about the 4 Imams, right? Then in each school, whether the Hanafi school, Maliki school, Shafi'i school, Hanbali school, you have 100 or more scholars who refine and add it to their work at every level, right? I want you to think about that. Let's put this clearly in our minds. So you got the 4 Imams who lived within the first 300 years after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in the 2nd century and 3rd century. So if we take those, you're talking about the last one to die was in the year 241, which was Imam Ahmed. So that's the 3rd century, 241 AH, Imam Ahmed. Now, if you go every century after that, so let's say a generation, we're in the 15th century. So you're talking about 12 centuries, over 1,200 years, and at each level, there were great, extraordinary scholars at each level of every century. So in the 4th century, you have great scholars that followed the school and refined and added to the work. The 5th century, 6th century, 7th century, 8th century, even down to our day, scholars still working on clarifying and explaining the madhab and, writing things to this day. That's a legacy. And all of that with an unbroken chain of student to teacher to student to teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher, all the way to it reaches those great Imams in every school, right? And not only that, that's just scholars, but there is a division of labor there, right? You have scholars that are specialists in Quranic explanation that are within each of those schools in those ranks. You have scholars that are master memorizers of hadith, hufaz. You have scholars who are masters of the Arabic language. You have scholars who are masters of the foundations of fiqh. You have scholars who are masters of the science of hadith. And all the different Islamic sciences, in each of those schools, you have masters, the top leading scholars in every field following one of those great Imams. This point you need to focus in on, because when someone rejects Al Madhaahib, they're not just rejecting Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Malik or Imam Shafi'i or Imam Ahmed alone. They're rejecting generations of scholars for 1,200 years who were the top scholars of the Islamic religion in every field of Islamic sciences. A question to y'all. Do you all realize the significance of such a denial? That's a question. Like, think about it. When you reject those schools of thought, and that person says, I don't follow a school. What they don't realize, what they're rejecting in that is a whole legacy of Islamic scholarship. That's a huge statement that has been made to seem like it's light. Of course, because people don't know what they're saying, right? But you're talking about rejecting thousands, tens of thousands of Islamic scholars over the history of this nation. And what you say you're following, the Quran and the Sunnah, you're rejecting the masters of those fields of study. Right? So you're not talking about you're just saying something I follow. No, you're rejecting the masters of the field, the experts of the field, the best that Islam has ever seen in the field. So if you're saying I follow Quran, that means you have the ability to explain the Quran and you understand the sciences of the Quran. But the very people who were the finest that Islam has produced among its learned people all followed Al Madhaahib, the schools of thought. And you, who are not nowhere near any of their level, are saying they were mistaken, and I, who are nowhere in, not even in a discussion of scholarship, I am doing what they were mistaken about. Likewise in hadith, or in any field of the Islamic religion, you're denying really all of those great scholars without realizing that's what you're saying. No, the one who rejects schools of thought is not a disbeliever. No, not at all. Every mistake doesn't make you a disbeliever. Every error doesn't take you out of Islam. And as Haja Stacy mentioned, people don't look at it like that. They don't even know to look at it like that, right? So it's not like something someone's walking around like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. No, they don't realize what they're saying is a statement that has become a slogan, but they don't realize the significance of what they're saying, right? They don't realize the significance of what is being said. What I'm highlighting to you is the significance of what is being said. So if we look at this statement that he said, so he's saying that there's 100 or more scholars, right, who refined and added their work. And then he talks the description of the scholars. Men whose stature in Islamic knowledge was like mountains. And those who are challenging them are not like pebbles of dust, right? Those who are contradicting Al Madhaahib in Islamic knowledge are not pebbles of dust. Let alone to be a mountain. And then this last statement, and I think you should highlight it because it's really significant. Right? He said any of them, any of whom, not just the Imam, but we're talking about the 100 or more scholars that follow those Imams, any of whom could put 15 of the scholars available today in his pocket. That line right there is so significant. Any one of them, not the 4 Imams alone, those hundreds of scholars who are experts in the field that refined and added to their work, any one of them could take 15 of today's scholars that are available and put them in his pocket. That's a big, huge statement. And anyone who studies the books of Al-Fiqh and the related sciences and everything connected to it will see that clearly. Yesterday, I was listening to one of the older sheikhs from Al-Azhar, and he was explaining Al-Bukhari. And I was listening to his explanation, and I was saying to myself, oh, man, these were scholars. Not like today's explanation. Even when they're explaining the hadith, they're explaining the terms of the hadith, the language of the hadith, the different ways of the language, different types of words, how you can use them, the different meanings, what they refer to linguistically, religiously. I was like, people don't even talk like that no more, right? Like blown away, right? The different ways in the language of the Arabs to say one word. And most of it, for all our purposes, because we have we're not there, it's just insignificant, most of it to us. But that is religious knowledge, when knowledge was knowledge. And that was the conversation, right? They understood different narrations and different wording of hadith and how one narration impacted another narration and which one was stronger between the two because of the men of the chains of narration and who was strong in this way and when they were strong and when they were not strong. SubhanAllah. And this was the norm among them, right? So when you see this and you see this point, you kind of understand how important that is. Now, so this is a point that I wanted to highlight, right? I want to go to a point to emphasize that we talked about. I'm sorry, 1 second. Allah. Go to page 869. all this is in preparation for what we're getting ready to read. I'm just laying down some foundations for you. W12.0. Allah. So those 100 scholars and the 4 imams, the scholars in every school are put in ranks. And the bottom of it is the lowest level of scholarship. And then under that, you just have common people, right? Even if the common person is learned, he's considered a common person, right? Not a scholar. But the scholars are in these ranks. And these scholars are all related to different levels of ability in al-ijtihad, personal legal reasoning, right? So every school has these levels or levels similar. They might not all use the same exact terminology, but the terminology and the levels are similar in every school, in the Hanafi school, Maliki school, Shafi'i school, and Hanbali school. Now, so this is because this book is originally a Shafi'i text, so they're going to mention those ranks according to the Shafi'i school. But there is the equivalent in every school. Go ahead. Bismillah.
The reason for various positions within one school.
So now we talk about between the 4 schools, you have differences. But also within one school, you got levels of scholarship, and based on those levels of scholarship, you're going to have different understanding of certain rulings, right? So it's important to understand that not everybody is at the same rank of knowledge in al-fiqh, for instance, or in any science. But we're talking about al-fiqh because we're relating to Al Madhaahib specifically right now.
Levels of scholars. W12.1. Salih Mu'adhin. To clarify the reason for scholarly disagreement within one legal school, we may say that scholars divide each school into various levels, the most important of which, per Nu Ali Salman, after the Imam, may be characterized as follows.
So the Imam is the Mujtahid Mutlaq. Remember we said the absolute Mujtahid. That is Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Al-Shafi'i, or Imam Ahmad, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. So that's like the Imam. Now, under those Imam, we talked about, he said 100 scholars or more. Within these ranks, that these levels he's going to mention, you'll find those 100 scholars or more. And actually, you have books of the levels of scholars within a particular school, every school. So you have books of tabaqat, that's what they call them, levels, ranks. Tabaqat of the scholars of the Hanafis, tabaqat of the scholars of the Shafi'is, tabaqat of the Malikis, and tabaqat of the Hanabila. So the word is that. Right? So you're going to have tabaqat, you have levels, ranks of scholars, right? So in every school, you're going to have tabaqat of the ulama, of the scholars in those schools. And there are books specifically on that. Like you have Tabaqat al-Shafi'iyyat al-Kubra by Tajuddin al-Subki, right? Remember we talked about Sheikh Taqiyuddin al-Subki? His son Tajuddin al-Subki has a book, a major book, of tabaqat of the Shafi'i scholars. Like Ibn Kathir has one, Ibn Salah has one, Ash-Shirazi has one, and others, all just in Shafi'i school. You have many books that are written on the tabaqat, the level of the ulama. But like in one, you have, in like at Shafi'atul Kubra, you got thousands of scholars that are just mentioned in that book alone. Thousands. In that book alone. It's around 6 volumes. And it's just talking about the Shafi'i school and the ranks all the way up to the time of Tajuddin al-Subki. From the time of Imam Shafi'i in the 3rd century, all the way up to Tajuddin al-Subki in the 8th century. And then you can come up and add the scholars that came after that. So there's ranks of scholars, thousands, right? And they're in different levels of these levels of scholars. That's in just one school, and that goes for every school. Are y'all following this? Before I move on, are y'all following the discussion so far? Are there any questions about what I talked about so far? Because maybe this is important for our conclusion. So if there's any questions about what I mentioned, don't go off somewhere that we're not talking about. No, none of these books are translated, unfortunately. I mean, that's scholarly stuff that for most of us is not significant, but it is because of what we go through. Normally, these discussions would never be held with regular people, common people. However, we live in a time where people are promoting themselves as scholars, and because of that, we don't recognize real scholarship, right? So it's important to explain what real scholarship is, right? Under normal circumstances, the common people would remain common people and they will refer to scholars, and we have no problem there. And that would be the work of the scholars, right? But in our time, regular people act like scholars. So therefore, they become a source of delusion for themselves and others to think to actually lower the bar of scholarship, if you follow what I mean. Like what we all do, whenever we have, by way of analogy, whenever one of us have legal troubles, whatever they may be, we go get a lawyer. And it's known that there are lawyers, and there are a bunch of lawyers, and we look for the best lawyers depending upon what we're doing. If the case happened to be where everybody's acting like a lawyer, right? And the people begin to believe they can fight their own cases, then you will have people who are really not qualified lawyers doing legal work. And they will be causing a lot of problems for people, right? So then at that point, it will become necessary to show you what a qualified lawyer would look like, right? That's the same thing that we're doing now. Because we have this modern movement of I don't follow a madhab, which is actually saying I'm a legal jurist, right? Without saying it, I'm a legal jurist. You're a legal jurist, really? Okay. All right, here's a real legal jurist. Now, how do you add to that? Well, how do you equate yourself with a real jurist? This is what a real legal scholar looks like. And now, what are you talking about? It's no, right? But if you never know what a real legal jurist looks like in Islam, then anyone could pass for a scholar, a sheikh, or a learned one, because you don't know what one looks like. You follow my point? Is that clear? So for us, we're mentioning these points to bring us back into our normal tradition of Islam, where there are ranks. Not everybody's the same, right? No, there are learned people, there are followers, there are professionals, there are experts. We're all not the same. That's the norm, but we're way outside the norm, right? And that's just to help us, because the book that we're studying, that we're going to move to tomorrow, Al Madhaahib. Here's the link to. I forgot to put the link up for those who still didn't get the book. There's the link. This book. Let me see for a minute. Before just hold that thought there, reader. I'm gonna come right back to it. So if you look at this book, it's called Al Madhaahib, right? Al Madhaahib means not following a school of thought. The complete title is Al Madhaahib, not following a school of thought, is the most dangerous innovation threatening the sacred law of Islam, right? Not following a school is the most dangerous innovation threatening the sacred law, the Islamic sacred law. That's what the name of the whole title, right? So what is he quoting? And another great scholar, Sheikh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari, rahimahullah, he wrote another treatise. He called it Not Following the Madhab, a School of Thought, Al-Madhabiyya, is a bridge to Al-Ladiniyya, to not having a religion at all. He was even more severe in his description. He didn't just say it's the worst bid'ah threatening the sacred law. He said that's a bridge to not having a religion at all. That's how severe he considered it, right? And when you think of such a statement, it's true, because it has resulted in having a religion that is not religion at all. Having an Islam that really is not Islam. Because you have would-be jurists giving legal rulings that contradict the whole sacred law. And it becomes normalized among the people because of abandoning true Islamic scholarship. So to the point, I don't want to say anything really controversial. Not necessary, because I really need to get the point. But to the point, things that are necessarily known to be of the religion that are haram, because of that, people begin to think they're permissible. So you have things that are necessarily known to be unlawful in the religion, that because of this idea of not following qualified scholarship, those things in the mind of people become permissible. Right? Based on that. All right. So these are very important points. All right, let's continue on page 869. So the first level.
Number 1, the first level, composed of those qualified to do ijtihad, independent legal reasoning within the school, deploying it according to the general methodological principles established by their imams, and who transmit the words of the imam, such scholars being called colleagues, including men like Musani.
Okay, so let's one level. So this first level they mentioned, these people are qualified to do ijtihad, we mentioned that, right? Within the school. So they're considered enrolled, if you want, in the school of the imam. So this is Imam Shafi. But they themselves are qualified to do ijtihad like the imam himself, but they do it following his principles of extracting legal rulings. So they follow the principles of that imam, but they're able to do that independently, right? They are al-ashab. They are the companions or the colleagues of the imam. In the Shafi'i school, a perfect example, and there are others, is Imam Al-Musini. Now, how do we know Imam Al-Musini from our studies in Aqidah? How does Imam Al-Musini become significant to us? That's a question. Let's review quickly. So Al-Musini would be at this first level, Imam Al-Musini. In our study of Aqidah on this platform, where does Imam Al-Musini become significant? How do we know about him? That's a question. the women should be first. They should jump on it because they just had that in their study group. So when we study in Aqidah, we studied books of Aqidah, and Al-Musani put up, Asa jumped out there and beat everybody. He was the uncle of Imam Al-Tahawi, right? Okay. And the maternal uncle of Imam Al-Tahawi, right? Right? Not the teacher of Imam Al-Ghazali. He's the uncle of Imam Al-Tahawi, right? Now, just as a bonus question, what is the chain from Al-Tahawi and Al-Musani, the strongest chain back to the Prophet? From Imam Al-Tahawi to his uncle Al-Musani, what would be the strongest and chain of that route back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? All right, go ahead. Come on, Issa. Don't let the women beat you. You represent all the men. Sheikh al-Rijal, Isa. So what is the chain from Tahawi to Musani back to the Prophet that is the strongest chain? Come on. Uh-oh. There it go. The women win. Isla. Tahawi to Imam Musani to Imam Al-Shafi'i to Imam Malik to Nafi' to Abdullah ibn Umar to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Right? And that chain from Malik to Nafi' to Ibn Umar is called the golden chain. And when you go Al-Shafi'i and to Ahmed, it becomes stronger. But Al-Shafi'i was also the sheikh of Imam Musani, who was also a sheikh of Imam Al-Tahawi. So when you see Al-Tahawi, you see he learned from masters. So you see the length of Al-Musani in the Shafi'i school, right? Al-Musani, and he is the one who conveyed the madhab of Al-Shafi'i. Tayyib, Al-Musani's book in the Shafi'i school is called what? The most famous book that was from the students of Al-Shafi'i that spread the madhab of Al-Shafi'i, written by Imam Al-Musani, is what's the name of the book? You should know this from review before. Muqtasar of Al-Musani, Sheikh Isa is right there. Okay, last question. When did Imam Al-Musani die? What year? Good, 264. Good. Isa keeps bringing the title home to the men. He's fast on the draw. MashaAllah. Tayyib. So now that's the level of Al-Musani, right? So that's the companions. Tayyib. In the school of the Hanafi school, who would be at that level of Al-Musani in the Shafi'i school? From Al-Tahawi, we know this. From our study in Aqidah, who would be at the level of Al-Musani in the Hanafi school? And we learned that also from Al-Tahawiyah. So everyone should know this because we study Al-Tahawiyah more than once. So who would be at the level of Al-Musani? No Nasafi, no Ghaznawi, come on. No. Y'all in a time warp. Put time. We just described Al-Musani is from the companions of Ash-Shafi'i. Right. And who else? Abdullah, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, and who else? Elder than him, older than him, would be senior to him. Qadi Abu Yusuf, Yaqub ibn Ibrahim al-Ansari. So you know when we study Al-Tahawi, the first line, the first paragraph in the Tahawiyah is, this is an elucidation of the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah according to the school of the jurists of the religion, Abu Hanifa and Nu'man ibn Thabit al-Kufi, Abu Yusuf Yaqub ibn Ibrahim al-Ansari, and Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. Remember that? Y'all remember that from the Tahawiyah? Do y'all remember? Yes, you remember, right? Everyone remembers? That, let me give you, I want to show you something. When you're studying and you have your notes, all this is going to connect. So it may seem isolated, but when you start studying and you expand, all your notes going to kick in. And it's going to help you to contextualize everything. So y'all have to review your notes. Every time you study a book, don't just study it one time and put it on a shelf. Go back, read your notes, review it, review it, review it, review it. Sit down, study with others. So you're constantly having all these cases in your mind. Because the further you get down in your studies, those things can come back to your mind easily. So that's the level of al-ijtihad fil madhab. Those people who are qualified to do ijtihad within the school, they are called al-mujtahid al-muqayyid, right? They're restricted within the madhab, right? And they are at the level of the colleagues of the imam. Good. So that's one level. Go ahead, the second level.
Number 2, the second level, composed of those qualified to do ijtihad on particular legal questions that were not discussed by the imam of the school, including such scholars as Imam Al-Ghazali.
Tayyib. So Imam Al-Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam, who died in what year? What year did Imam Al-Ghazali die? Imam Al-Ghazali, what year? 505. Good. So now you're talking, what year did Imam Al-Shafi'i die? What year did Imam Al-Shafi'i die? Mm-hmm. 204. So you're talking about 300 years after Imam Al-Shafi'i, Imam Al-Ghazali. So you see a 300-year connection, right? From Imam Al-Ghazali back to Imam Al-Shafi'i. So in those ranks, every 100, you got great scholars, right? At each tabaqah. So you got 3 levels or more between Imam Al-Ghazali and Imam Al-Shafi'i. And there are scholars, top scholars in the school at every one of those levels. Imam Al-Ghazali is talking about what? Now cases, masail, that Imam Al-Shafi'i didn't discuss. They weren't happening in his time. So as we know, new matters come up, and in each scholars at that time are going to deal with those new matters, right? Within those new matters, he's going to apply the methodology of deducing legal rulings from the previous scholars and their works. He has all that as a reference, right? So Imam Al-Ghazali is at the level of the people of ijtihad in al-masail, right? Right, in different cases that were not dealt with the school. Now, quickly, Imam Al-Ghazali wrote 4 major books in al-fiqh, in Shafi'i fiqh. 4 books. What were they? 4 major books by Imam Al-Ghazali in Shafi'i fiqh. And this is in the beginning of the 6th century, 5th, 6th century. So Isla got 3 of them. Al-Basit, Al-Wasit, and Al-Wajiz, right? So Al-Basit is first, then he summarized it to Al-Wasit, then he summarized Al-Wasit into Al-Wajiz. And then he has one more book in fiqh, and what is it? Among his major works in fiqh. No, not Al-Mukhtasar. Isa again brings the prize home to the brothers. So Al-Wasit, no, it's Al-Basit, Al-Wasit, Al-Wajiz, and Al-Khulasa, right? Al-Khulasa. So those are the 4 books of Imam Al-Ghazali, right? And they're all in the Shafi'i fiqh, with some reference to new cases that were not mentioned by the Imam himself, right? So he's doing ijtihad within the principles of the school, right? And he's at a level of ijtihad. He's a qualified scholar to do personal legal rulings, right? Legal reasoning, right? So that's another level. And there are scholars in the school at those levels. Of course, there are scholars who deal with issues, but these are cases that got to be brought to them. Are there scholars specifically that sit around and deal with issues in the United States? Yeah, there are, but they're not at the ranks of these scholars. That's why I said the statement of Sheikh Shuaib Arnaout when he said that any of those scholars can take 15 of today's scholars and put them in the pocket. That's real when you start really realizing the ranks of these scholars. That's why that becomes important. Islamic knowledge has deteriorated, not increased. Deteriorated. Scholarship has deteriorated, and it will continue like that way to the day of judgment. But what is left, we have to be able to preserve our tradition, deal with our reality, and join between the two. Does that make sense, Brother Naveer? We have to preserve our tradition because of the lack of scholarship. We have to deal with our reality and then join between the two. That's a difficult task. So we have a function in that, right? We have a big job to do in that. That's why we keep reading books, because by us reading books, to our ability, we're playing a role in preserving our tradition. When there is a constant effort, a sustained, rigorous effort to destroy our tradition within Islam. And that is the whole La Madhaahib trend, right? That whole trend is designed to ruin our sacred law, wipe it out. So by us reading these books, by us studying them and becoming more aware of our tradition, we slow that onslaught down, right? So if every day we got 100 people or more that are listening, right? And others who are listening and they're learning, they're not going to be victimized by that onslaught. And they would ultimately, after review, they would be able to explain this stuff themselves. And then once they're at a level to explain what I'm saying, I could take them to another level. Then when they get to another level, then we can have our teachers take them to another level. And eventually they would become teachers and we would sustain the effort of preserving our tradition. You follow what I'm saying? But we gotta do the groundwork, because this is a problem all around the world, but this problem exists, but also for us, the lack of resources because of our deficiency make it even worse. right? So we can't research, most of us. Lack of Arabic language, lack of books, lack of access to scholars. So we're stuck, a lot of us. So those who have that have to share and educate the others and to, upgrade them, so that eventually it becomes something commonplace in our communities. Right? Even if one cannot articulate it well, he knows those who know how to articulate it. And it's a way of protecting. So don't think because you're not learned or a scholar that you don't have a role to play. This job has become, so look at it this way. There is a rule in fighting the enemy in Islam that's fard kifaya. That's a communal obligation. Not everybody has to do it. But if the Muslim town is attacked and surrounded, everyone who's able have to defend, right? Everyone who's able has to fight. So if you look by analogy, usually it's the soldiers who fight, right? Usually. But if you look at the situation in Ukraine, they're being attacked. Now you got regular people picking up weapons to fight and defend the country, right? I'm not getting political, but I'm just giving you an example, right? So that's what's happening. If you watch the news, regular people, even some women, are fighting now. They're not soldiers. Guy might have been an accountant, but because the city is under attack, the country's under attack, everybody's defending. People coming from neighbor countries that are Ukrainian, that were studying, they're coming into the country to fight, right? So it's a similar thing. When our religion is being attacked, the common person who normally wouldn't have no business in this stuff needs to get involved and help to protect the religion. Is that analogy clear for y'all? So that's what we're doing. We're like the college student who was studying in Poland, and now he leaves his studies and enters the country of Ukraine to defend his country and protect the people, even though he's not a soldier. That's where we at, by analogy. We have this onslaught of our tradition, and we have to defend, even though we're not scholars. No. This is Khadijah's question. These new matters dealt with by Imam Al-Ghazali, are these matters resolved by deductive reasoning based on intellect? Different aspects of the Islamic or the science of jurisprudence, because there's different cases. Like, for instance, in our time, you have things that arrive. In the time of Imam Al-Ghazali, there wasn't no airplanes, right? There's airplanes in our times. There got to be legal rulings based on what to do in an airplane. The scholars who are at that level, they're going to discuss all of the they're going to take the toolbox of Islamic jurisprudence, or the fundamentals of Islamic jurisprudence, and they're going to apply it to these new cases and come up with legal rulings, right? That's called ijtihad. And it may be, it's a whole work in that. That's a field, right? And likewise, there are going to be difference of opinion in this. Why? Because these things never existed. So the scholars are using different methodological principles to deduce legal rulings. That's the nature of ijtihad. And that's why you have to have qualifications for it, which we discussed. Not anyone can do it. Right? Okay, go ahead. Number 3.
Number 3, the third level, composed of those qualified to do textual exegesis, and who, because of their comprehensive mastery of the works of the school, specialize in interpreting the positions of their Imams that require details and explanation to be properly understood, and in specifying the precise meaning of rulings which might otherwise be understood equivocally, including such scholars as the Imams of the two sanctuaries, Juwaini.
As the Imam of the two sanctuaries, which is
Excuse me,
Imam
as the
Tayyib.
Imam.
So who was Imam? So these scholars, they're going to take the different positions that happen in the madhab, in the school, from different scholars, and they're going to bring out all these different positions, right? And discuss them and clarify them, right? So where you have different scholars from different parts of the world who were scholars, and they had different approaches within the school. This scholar, he's from the people of extracting all of those different positions and then explaining the details related to them. In the Shafi'i school, in that time, we had an Iraqi school and a Khurasani school, right? So Imam Juwaini is going to look at these scholars of those schools and their position and then explain the details related to them. There's a lot of details to that, but I'm just giving you a general idea. Tayyib, who was Imam Al-Juwaini? Who was Imam Al-Juwaini? Called Imam Al-Haramain. There's an indication here I'm getting ready to give you. Who is Imam Al-Juwaini? Y'all all should know this. Go to your charts. The teacher or sheikh of Imam Al-Ghazali. The women win. Isla beat you, Isa. So the sheikh of Imam Al-Ghazali. Tayyib. Imam Al-Juwaini explained the Mukhtasar of Al-Musani. In which book? His famous work in which he explained the Mukhtasar of Al-Musani, the companion of Shafi. What is the book? In which book? I'm looking for a young sister. I don't know where she's at. Please answer some questions. Okay, good. Isa's killing it. Sheikh Isa. What you say, Isa? I'll carry the brothers on my shoulders. My shoulders big enough. I am my brother's keeper. Nihayatul Matlab. Right. Right? So this book, Nihayatul Matlab, is over 20-something volumes in explaining the one volume that Imam Al-Musini mentioned, wrote in his Mukhtasar. Tayyib. So it's an explanation of Al-Mukhtasar of Imam Musini, Nihayat al-Matlab, by Imam Al-Juwaini. So what you'll learn from this, and I hope this for all of you, that Imam Al-Juwaini was the sheikh of Imam Al-Ghazali, but Imam Al-Ghazali became more known and more relied upon than Imam Juwaini himself, his sheikh. Right? So what we're hoping from you is that you listen to this poor servant and you learn and you become the sheikh and you become the reference. And people know you more than they know me, right? So what is hoped, we want to have us work like Imam Al-Ghazali and surpass in the teacher. So everyone knows Imam Al-Ghazali, and his works are studied and referred, but not many know Imam Al-Juwayni, except people who are into the school, then they would know this. But the works that are used and relied and mentioned are the works of Imam Al-Ghazali over Imam Al-Juwayni in terms of al-fiqh. Now, and other than that, like usul al-fiqh, even the more popular work is the works of Imam Al-Juwayni, but Imam Al-Ghazali's works are more detailed, right? So you will see the strength of the student who could become the sheikh. And he actually took over the post and the position of Imam Al-Juwayni in Naysabur, and of who in Iraq? Isa. So he took the Nizamiya after Imam Al-Juwayni, and that was in Naysabur. And in Iraq, he took over the Nizamiya after what great sheikh in the Shafi'i school? Imam Al-Ghazali we're talking about. What great sheikh? Imam Al-Ghazali came after him as the leader of Al-Madrasatu Nizamiya. Who was that great sheikh? Famous in the Shafi'i school. Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi. Good. There you go, Isa. Boy, Isa strutting his feathers today. Oh, my goodness. Tayyip. All right, bonus question at that rank. Al-Shirazi wrote a famous book that was explained by Imam Al-Nawawi, which represent the real height of the Shafi'i school. What was the book by Al-Shirazi, and what was the book by Imam Al-Nawawi that he explained that book of Imam Shirazi? Just make sure because I'm helping us to realize how vast our tradition is, right? Mm-hmm. So, Al-Shirazi wrote a famous book in that time, which was the famous book of the Shafi'iyah in Iraq, in Baghdad. And Imam Al-Nawawi explained that book, and that became a main reference in the latter Shafi'i school. Which book Imam Al-Nawawi explained of Shirazi? So it's two books. What are they, Isa? Isa, where's that notebook? Come on, come on, come on. This is how we're going to preserve our tradition, because we're learning all this stuff, and then we know these are reference points. So when somebody come with foolishness, we already know our tradition, and we know its connection, and we know the chains and the links, right? Good, Isa. So, Al-Muhadhab, no, you pronounced it wrong. Okay, but I know what you're trying to say. Al-Muhadhab by Al-Shirazi, and Imam Al-Nawawi explains in his book Majmu'ah. Right, good. What? I know what he's trying to say. Oh, you don't get credit for messing the words up? All right, Isa, the women said you strutting too much. Either you say it right or it's wrong. Boy, the women sound like sore losers around here. Let me stop. Alhamdulillah. Right. Al-Muhadhab. Good. Okay, good. So that's Juwayni, right? Okay, quickly. Al-Juwayni wrote that book, Nihayat al-Matlab. Who summarized that book among the famous scholars of the Shafi'i, and what is the name of the book? And he is a representative of the height of the latter school of the Shafi'is. Right. Al-Basit. Right. Good. Imam Al-Ghazali. Good. And then Imam Al-Ghazali summarized all his books to Al-Wajiz, right? And who commentated on Al-Wajiz, who was before Imam Al-Nawawi, but is the reliable opinion in the Shafi'i school in the absence of Imam Al-Nawawi. And what is the name of the book? Al-Rafi. In which book he explained Al-Wajiz? No, not Al-Muharrar. Fathul Aziz. Right. Abdullah. That's an H after the T, Isa. Fathul Aziz. Right. Good. Then Imam Al-Nawawi, he summarized Fathul Aziz in which book? Allah. In which book? So Al-Nawawi summarized Fathul Aziz by Al-Rafi to which book? Rawdatul Talibin. Good, Isa. Go for it. Boy, he's rolling. Isa's rolling. All right. What are you learning from all this? We're only at the third level. You see all this work within the school, right? Right? All this work, and we're only up to the 7th century. You see all this work, you see all these scholars, right? That's in every school like that. And these names are top scholars, right? And here comes these guys, somebody, I don't follow no madhab. And these, so I'm giving you the names and I'm pointing to their works and how they worked on each other works, refined and added and explained and summarized. You got to put all this stuff in your mind so you can realize what is being said. When someone tells you, I don't follow no madhab, they're men and we're men. Really? It's ridiculous when you think about it, especially when you realize what is being said. Go ahead, number 4.
Number 4, and the 4th level, which is composed of those qualified to weigh various scholarly positions and judge which is the soundest, evaluating their imams' positions in terms of the reliability of the narrators of the channels of transmission of the opinion from the imam, or in terms of the understanding shown in treating particular legal questions, and who may then say which is the stronger or more suitable position. This level including such men as the 2 sheikhs, Rafi'i and Nawawi.
Rafi and Nawawi we mentioned. So now that's up, right? And then when we go to the ladder after Imam Rafi and Imam Al-Nawawi, the latter ranks of the school are 3 major imams, and they got 3 major books for the latter Shafi'i school. What are those 3 imams and what are their books? And they are in the 10th century, roughly. All of them in the 10th century. What are their names and what are the books? And they all wrote commentaries on the main book of Imam Al-Nawawi that's used for fatwa, legal judgment in the Shafi'i school. So what is the book of Imam Al-Nawawi that is relied upon as the dominant position in the school that is studied? What is that book of Imam Al-Nawawi? The author of the 40 Hadith, Riyad al-Salihin, Sharh Sahih Muslim, right? Al-Adhkar. He was a Shafi'i scholar, as is mentioned. He wrote the famous book that is studied at the level of legal ruling, the fatwa, in the Shafi'i school. What is that book? Not al-adhkar. Fiqh. Y'all studied all this. It's Minhaj, right, Isa? Minhaj al-Talibin, right? Right on, Isa. Tayyib. Now, the latter scholars in the Shafi'i school, there are three main scholars who all wrote commentaries on Minhaj. Who are the three scholars and what are the three books? And they represent really the conclusion of the scholarly work and that is relied upon in the Shafi'i school. Those three books and those three scholars. And they're all commentaries on Minhaj. What are they, Habibi? That's the bonus question. So we up to 4. And now we're going further. Okay, Isa, you're correct. Imam Al-Ramli, Ibn Hajar Al-Haytami, and Al-Khatib Al-Shirbini. What are the three books and who wrote which book? So there are the three. What are the three books and who wrote them? So who wrote what book? What are the three books that they wrote and who wrote which book? Oh, we got to stop. I'm sorry. All right, we got to save that to tomorrow. I'm over time. I had something to do. But let's see if we can just answer this last question. Okay, what are the three books? So we got the scholars. What are the books? All of this information is so no one can just easily trick you. You have reference points. You see the vastness of one school and the equivalent of what because I'm Shafi'i, so I can mention this stuff. I know it well. But in every school, there is the same thing. In the Hanafi school, in the Maliki school, in the Shafi'i school, in the Hanbali school. So, okay, Tuhfatul Muhtaj, right? That is Ibn Hajar, okay. Al-Haytami. What else, Isa? Tuhfa, Tuhfat. Okay, that's one, Ibn Hajar. Now you got two more and two more books, Al-Ramli and Al-Shirbini. Nihayatul Muhtaj, Al-Ramli, good. And Al-Shirbini. Al-Shirbini. We got all this stuff is in our notes. All you got to do is study and remember. Y'all be just passing your notes and not studying. It's there. All this stuff is in your notes. Now you got to take it out the notebook and put it in your brain. We read all the biographies of all these scholars. We went all over it. We went over all this stuff. There are, but they're scattered, Naveer. You have to like find them. They exist, but I can't guide you to them. I don't know if the books are just straight for that. I don't know any books like that. But I'm quite sure they are scattered through different books in every school. Okay, Isla won. Issa, you came too late. She gets the bonus. The women win the whole contest. Not Sharh Mughni al-Muhtaj. That's the book. Mughni al-Muhtaj by Ash-Shirbini. Right. So Mughni Mutaj Sharh Minhaj is an explanation. So there is all of them. Tuhfa by Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, and Ihaya by Al-Ramli, and Al-Mughni by Al-Khatib al-Shirbini. Islam Muhammad has saved the day for the women. She made the game-winning shot, Issa. You played a good game all game long, but it came down to the wire, and Isla sunk a three-pointer on you. You had all the rounds beat, 3 seconds, 10 seconds left in the final round, and she caught you with an uppercut. What can I do? She did a Tom Brady on you. You was up, and she marched down the field with 1 minute and 30 seconds and scored a touchdown. All right, I love y'all. Inshallah, we start tomorrow on Al Madhaahib. Tomorrow we start this book. So, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Inshallah ta'ala. So there's the link for those. There's only a few left. So those who didn't get it, please hurry up before you be calling me later talking about some of his new books. They said a 3-pointer that counted as 10 points. All right, inshallah, may Allah reward y'all. Don't forget tonight, Sheikh Walid Rifai at 7 o'clock. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow. Barakallahu bikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.